Welcome, everybody. This is Eddie Buchanan. I'm a Division Chief of Hanover Fire and EMS. Welcome to an ISFSI webinar. It's a member-only type of situation. I'm here with Ben Walker from the UK. Ben, tell them hello, sir.
How you doing, guys? Good to be back. Some of you may have met me before at SDIC and various other conferences, and it's nice to be joining you from the UK.
While we get started, our purpose today is to talk about training, how the different approaches to how we train firefighters related to fire dynamics. And I guess in my head, I'm thinking of, how do you train recruits? How do you do people who are already in your department and on the job? And then you can pose your questions too. So if you're listening in on the webinar and you have the GoToMeeting site set up, you can type in a question. We've already got one from Matt. We see you, Matt. We'll get you in a second, buddy. And we've also got one by email that we'll address as well. So you can get it to us a couple of different ways, but the easiest thing is to type it right in the system here. And I'll try to also go check on Twitter from time to time. If you use the hashtag ISFSI, I'll see if I can find you there as well. So we got a couple of different ways for you to get questions into the conference call, and then we'll do our best to get to them. I hope that we can. So if you're on our side of the pond, you probably know who I am. But if you're somewhere else, I'm Eddie Buchanan. I'm a Division Chief with Hanover Fire and EMS. We're just north of Richmond, Virginia. We're probably most known for being the department that created the SWICE-RS concept that became later the Principles of Modern Fire Attack. And I'm certainly not an engineer. I don't really even claim to be an expert in fire dynamics. I know a little bit about it, but I would say probably most of my background's from training. Is trying to figure out how to take new information and how to pass it along to the troops. That's really kind of where I think my expertise lies. So Ben, on your side, for the guys that are on our side of the pond that may not be familiar with you, give them a little bit of background on where you come from.
So my background is from the industrial north of England. I started off my career in a city called Newcastle upon Tyne. Some of you may have drank the Newcastle Brown Ale, the beer, and city of about 1.1 million people over there. And I was moved pretty quickly through the equivalent of lieutenant and captain up to sort of a shift commander. Worked extensively on the operational, on the response side, also then moving into training, usual thing every firefighter, got rid of the first wife, spent about a year traveling around in the US with the family, learning, doing a few of the FEMA courses, watching the operations, then got the call to go back and run live fire training for the London Fire Brigade, the biggest fire department in the world, very large metropolitan, and at present, doing a lot of conference work. Just had this published, which is a very straightforward guide to fire dynamics, written in language that firefighters all over the world can understand, with the aid of some very, very simple diagrams that we've got as well, which hopefully we're going to use to answer John's question in a little while. And here I am, hopefully moving full time to the States, certainly January next year, if not hopefully before Thanksgiving. So also looking for a job with the department if anybody's hiring at the moment. So that's me, and that's where I'm at.
So out of curiosity, so like where I'm from, in Virginia, there's no real formal training that a firefighter can take outside of the Principles of Modern Fire Attack class that the ISFSI does. There's really no course per se, right? For example, in my department, I still go back and train the recruits. Like we have recruits start each recruit school. We come in and they have their fire behavior class that they learn, which has not really changed. But then I'll come in and do the fire dynamics class, which is more of the updated stuff, right? It's kind of like what you need to know to pass the test, and this is what you need to know to survive. And America, I guess each state is different, but I don't know that we've evolved to any kind of formal training outside of what the ISFSI has been able to put together that's recognized across a global scale. So how does, tell us about how that works in the UK how does a firefighter go from being brand new, doesn't know anything, to being, how do they get their fire dynamics training?
Coincidentally, I've got this to hand. This is a federal document that was authored in October 2000, and it's not been updated since. I mean, I'm actually in the process of rewriting it for the UK. That's my last role, before leaving for the US, is to update it completely. But this has got a number of aims and objectives in, and we'll see if I bring this up to the screen. You'll see we've got training objectives there for experienced firefighters. They've also got recruits, and there's a very loose syllabus for people at various different stages of their career, sort of from recruit to probationary firefighter to experienced firefighter. Now, one of the issues that we had with that was it wasn't really as progressive as it should be. So, in terms of replacing it, we've actually changed it. We've amalgamated. We've brought all of the the fire dynamics for firefighters together, because it's as dangerous on the first day on the job as it is, if you've got 25, 26 years in, the danger of complacency. But I've also introduced elements of reading fire and for incident commanders, tactical decision making, more information for our pump operators, what you guys call engineers, about water flow versus heat release rate. And we're moving in that direction. So it's a federal compliance document that each individual fire department, whether it's the metropolitans, the big cities, or the what they call the county brigades, which is more like it's run on a state basis, have to base their training to satisfy those aims and objectives. So it's a framework, but if the department fails, God forbid, has a line of duty death or an incident in training, the health and safety executive, which is the UK version of OSHA, would do an investigation. If they fail to comply with the aims and objectives in this document, that would be brought up in an inquest in a court of law, and they'd have to explain why.
So, well, that's deep. So there's a couple parts there I want to talk about. So the first thing, how many hours, I guess, is a good way to try to quantify it, does a brand new firefighter get in the UK? How much exposure have you had to fire dynamics when you first go to work?
The difficulty that we had, Eddie, was that people would join initially, and whilst they would do at least 2 weeks of dedicated SCBA training, which would then be progressively incorporated over the final 4 to 6 weeks of a recruit training course, which usually was between 16 to 20 weeks. The difficulty was that the live fire didn't get introduced till the end. So we tried nationally to revise that and incorporate live fire initially as early as we can in the SCBA process. So obviously once the set familiarization has been done, people are comfortable sort of, donning and doffing the SCBA, we'll introduce an element of fire dynamics at that stage. We've recently found it's counterproductive teaching people to do sort of search techniques, to, compartment clearance and those type of things, and then get put into a live fire situation where the priority has to be fire attack using thermal image cameras and really having a very loose brief rather than a structured brief that may take you away from a fire, which is then burning longer, creating more products of pyrolysis and unburned fuels, and potentially more dangerous situations. So we're shifting our model towards one of live fire and fire dynamics, away from the traditional SCBA. So I would say realistically, we'd like the recruits in the full-time fire department to have undertaken 50 to 60 hours prior to getting on to the firehouse as a probationary firefighter.
So in comparison, we have 3-hour minimum of classroom instruction for fire behavior, not fire dynamics necessarily. It's more about definitions and fire triangle, very basics. We add, if we want to add to that, the 8-hour course we get from the ISFSI. So I don't know who that is.
Deepening your knowledge.
Whoever that is, somebody could. If you have a question, you could type it in the box down there. That way we don't get too distracted. But anyway, sorry. So I was curious to see how does that compare, as America starts to really kind of, this was new to us within the last 10 years, so to speak. People could debate whether any of the tactics are new or not, but the idea of fire dynamics is somewhat new, comparatively. And as we start to institutionalize that, I think instructors are starting to wrestle with, okay, well, now we need to build it into the institution of training as far as how much effort should we be putting into this fire dynamics topic, looking at what the United States is doing, looking at what the UK is doing, looking at what the other European countries are doing, and just from my quick glance around the globe a little bit to see what everybody's doing, we are way short as far as effort, as to what emphasis we're putting on this particular topic. What do you think?
I mean, the theoretical side of the fire dynamics, it leads into everything else. It's a foundation building block because the fire science and how a fire burns and the way that the gases travel leads into, the ventilation strategies, it leads into the water application strategies, and even the departments that are using, positive pressure ventilation or mechanical ventilation. It's the foundation that, feeds in and leads into to everything else. I mean, I would say probably the most important aspect of operational firefighting, establish it, and everything else drops in the context. I generally like to have the recruits do 12 to 16 live fire evolutions prior to passing out and going on station. But that again, it depends on the department's budget. It's often fairly restricted. You can actually achieve a lot. If anybody's seen the Dollhouse demonstration with the strand board boxes in terms of teaching fire dynamics, teaching the principles of ventilation, we still make mistakes in the UK. And one of the benefits I've had of spending a lot of time in the US is that unlike some of the Europeans, I understand there's certain differences, and you can't just import wholesale sort of British technique or the Scandinavian technique. I mean, if we use Scandinavia as an example, because the place is so cold, the houses are triple insulated, triple glazed, there's a lot of heat being kept within, and it's very difficult for a fire to breach and to self-ventilate, for example. So we're coming into situations where they're generally ventilation controlled with the more potential for backdraft. In the US, the warmer states, lighter construction, there's a lot more chance of, that fire breaching, maybe a window failure, maybe people even have the windows open for ventilation. So the profile's different. So importing a European technique which is suitable for their type of construction in their homes, using low flow, sort of high pressure, isn't always applicable to the US. So I think a blended approach, or developing a hybrid model with the best of both practices, would be beneficial in terms of moving things forward. And certainly, the principles of ISFSI give a solid foundation for people to work from.
Yeah, I think we could probably talk about that a bit too. The training methodology. I get asked a lot about the ISFSI thing, and I think people are surprised when I tell them that when we go out to a fire here in Hanover, you don't see the engine officer getting off with his notepad that says ISFSI on it. That's not the way they get off and do the thing. They take care of it. But you do hear it mentioned a lot in the training academy, because that's the basis of where we're teaching that concept, right? So you have what we have, and one of the things I noticed in that document you held up, that guy's the tactics there in the UK.
This one.
Yeah, that guy right there. Was it 2000? You said the date on that is?
Yeah, October 2000.
So, I mean, look at the time difference there. We're just starting to try to conceive a document like that in the United States. So, we're just starting to put the pieces together where I think in the UK you guys might have us by a few years where you've already got that written down. You know, we don't have this on paper yet. We're working on it. There's efforts right now to try to do that. The other interesting piece I heard you mention was you would be held accountable to that legally. Like if you fail to comply with the guidance in that document, you're legally responsible.
Yeah, I mean that's the main differentiation between sort of the NFPA standards and this, because we can again, people can be held accountable for it and have been held accountable for it. Every line of duty death in the UK, it's generally ends in a court case with everybody's actions being analysed and compared and contrasted against things that have come out from this document, including the department's standard operating procedures, and working from there. And it's again, it's something that becomes second nature in a lot of ways because it's been trained and accepted for that long. But the danger that we've had is it doesn't really go into the depths of, you know, modern fire loading. I mean, what you guys call legacy materials, you know, sort of late 90s. I mean, over the last 16 years, I mean, the loading certainly in the UK, but around the world, completely changed. A lot more high energy items. You know, we've got, you know, smartphones. There's, you know, battery cells. There's, you know, all kinds of high energy release stuff, which is again changing the burning profile and the burning regime and the appropriate tactics. One of the issues that we certainly had with this was that it didn't really talk an awful lot about flow paths. Certainly, some departments in the UK, my original department up in Newcastle, we pioneered positive pressure ventilation training. We're using it aggressively from '98, so actually predates that document. But the issue we've got is we still have people in the UK that don't understand flow paths. They don't understand the effect of, you know, opening and closing doors and windows. Sadly, we had a line of duty death in Scotland about 4 years ago, and with a firefighter in a basement, and they decided to ventilate a ground floor. And obviously the drawing effect on the fire and its development, as well as allowing the ingress of air to bring the fire into the flammable range, you know, led to a deflagration. And again, it was, you know, it's pretty simple science, but we didn't and we don't understand it fully, and that's where we're coming up short now. And that's why myself and Dave, who I mentioned earlier, are rewriting that for the government. But, you know, seeing as, you know, our government and your government are having a race to see who can mess things up the quickest, we don't know exactly, you know, who's going to be signing it off or not. It's meant to be our Secretary of State's office, but, you know, that's recently changed, and the you know, the secretaries, the congressmen that are running it are changing constantly on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So we don't even know who we work for anymore.
Hey, let's ask this question we got from John O'Neill from Noblesville Fire Department, Station 71A. He says, we have recently started to introduce SliceRS in our department. There has been a bit of controversy on if you should do exterior water, but how you should apply the exterior water. This comes from the ATF videos that Adam St. John did, where they show using a fog pattern for exterior water application versus the SliceRS and UL trainings that are adamant about using a straight stream or smooth bore. Can you talk about why the ATF experiments didn't get much, if any, push of smoke, heat, or steam? And the ISFSI Spartanburg burns show a huge push through the structure. And he says, that's why I'm not talking about pushing fire, but just pushing products of combustion heat and steam. I don't know that I've seen that ATF video, first off. Maybe I have, but I'm not sure which one he's talking about. Are you familiar with that?
I've not actually seen the videos, but it's a great question. I can certainly give some insight into it. In terms of, I'm going to refer back to this book, and again, you'll have seen a version of this graphic before, what they call a unidirectional flow path, and we'll see that we've got the exiting gases sort of from this window here, or this opening, and what John's talking about is sort of let's project a jet in that direction, through that opening to have a cooling effect. Now, again, being unfamiliar with the building in itself, all I'd say is that using a fog pattern, which again will also draw some air in, would create a more of a sealing effect on around this area, whereas a straight stream or a jet would also allow the gases to escape, sort of as they are at present. So it's just a case of, the fog stream would seal or close this, and the straight stream wouldn't seal it. And again, just the basic law of pressure, if those gases can't escape from that opening, where are they going to go within the building? And it depends, and they'll always move from an area of high pressure, this heated gas, to an area of low pressure. Now it depends on the size of the building. Are the doors to adjacent compartments or rooms open, or is it going to move quickly, say down the corridor to an area of low pressure? It's all we're doing really is a fog stream is going to block or create a sealing effect on any exiting gases through an opening. So it's a very good question, but I mean certainly exterior application, if that if it's acting as an exhaust vent or an exhaust point, I would always go for a straight stream or certainly a narrow jet. He'd be a good boy.
Yeah, I can't speak to the ATF stuff. I can speak to the ISFSI stuff, and particularly when we were putting that together, that particular video set. It's exactly that. The building's under pressure. It's exhausting out of a particular opening. It's particularly if it's a unidirectional flow path like you were talking about. When we use a fog stream, typically what's happening is you're occluding the vent. So that vent is working, and now you're going to stop it up. Well, if you stop up the vent, it's got to go someplace else, right? So it's going to go to the next path of least resistance, whatever that might be. So to avoid that, we use the straight stream to allow that ventilation opening to continue to work while we put water through it. That's the basic premise of that. If the ATF got some other outcome, I'd have to go look at the parameters of that research. I have no idea what they did. And I will add to that, there's still more information coming on the street, at least on the United States side, because of the fire tax study about to publish soon. So you'll see more information, more in-depth information. I would probably even go so far as to say definitive type information on those ins and outs of particular fire attacks, because they tested each one specifically to see what was what causes what, and it looked at everything from victim impact to
working on. Certainly in Europe, one of the issues that we're encountering at the moment is the reduced staffing. We're getting 2 guys turning up in a pickup truck. So if there's no life risk, or we're not going to be conducting any rescues, they're actually using now a thing called the smoke curtain. Have you seen it? It's on a racket.
Yep. Dr. Michael Reich. Yep.
Dr. Reich. He's making a lot of money over there, and they're actually getting these guys to implement them and seal them up in the doorway. And they're actually using a system called well, cobra is the trade name. It's a cold cutting or a fog nail, and it's basically a very, very high pressure mist to go through a window frame or even through a brick or masonry wall now. And they're using a misting technique to try and inert the smoke gases within, rather than, which again, it's not taking any of the heat really, but it's inerting the gases. But it's twofold. Eventually, the crews are going to have to go in, but it's preventing any deterioration. It's not really my, it's not really my style. I'd rather, get sort of water on early, go that way, and then use, use an aggressive ventilation technique horizontally, if possible, rather than any kind of vertical or roof ops. But it's getting very popular, and also the misting technique externally in the UK. But again, it's being driven by finances, by rather than say 5 guys turn up on a first truck, there's just 2 guys coming up and they're offsetting the cost of the equipment versus saving the 3 guys' salary. It's I don't want to just start getting into the politics, but sadly that's also driving the operations as much as the advances and developments that we're making in fire dynamics and tactics.
Yeah.
But, I guess that's the same all over the US.
Very much so. And real quick, guys, if you have a question, don't hesitate to type it in the box down here, or you can try to email it to the ISFSI, or I'll check Twitter here in a minute and see if it's popping up over there. But I think you bring up a good point. Go ahead, Ben.
I just apologise about my nephew. He's a Patriots fan. What can I say?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. One of the things we've talked about around the office a little bit at home has been, so we do EMS as well. We have EMS transport units that are out there, and we cover a large area. So these people riding these ambulances are firefighters. They're fully very capable firefighters, just happen to be riding the ambulance that day. And I know that if they're out in a remote area and they pull up on a house fire and there's any chance that anybody's inside of the house, I know what they're going to do. I can tell them not to do it. I can write whatever policy I want, but they're going to do the same thing I would do if there's somebody trapped in there. We're going to go get them.
Yeah. So
we've been looking at different. Are there other alternative things we could employ here to try to control the fire? And we use the term in the absence of a pumper. So if there's no pumper available, you happen to be there, you're standing there with your radio in your hands, you can either do nothing or you can do, whatever. So we started playing around with water cans, discussing what could be done with a water can. How much can you get done with a water can? And then we started looking at other options. Can we use some of these smaller high pressure units that I guess would resemble the fog nail a little bit?
Yeah.
Are there other? Are you guys seeing any of that in the UK as far as alternative setting up this pickup? You said a guy shows up in a pickup truck. What you got to work with?
Yeah, those guys have generally just got a very high pressure reel. 90 mil, which is what is the inch and 3/4. High pressure hose reel tubing. They do carry a CBA, but it becomes a difficult thing. They're not really meant to make any aggressive intervention, and this is where Dr. Wright's the smoke curtains would be good. So I would say the best thing they could do with limited equipment would be if they could isolate the room of origin by either shutting the doors, closing the windows, erecting the smoke curtain, and try and isolate it, and then at least we've got a burning profile that we have got a reasonable idea of when the pumper can attend and work from there. But a lot of it comes down to the lack of understanding of fire dynamics that we've got from our first response ICs. Now, in the UK, the first attending casting generally won't do what Brincini calls, being a fast attacking IC. There won't be a transfer of command, in that the guy that turns up on the pumper in charge would do what you guys would consider to be a battalion chief's job. They won't sort of go in. The lieutenant would obviously go in and lead a sort of a forward command point. But again, a lot of these guys haven't got the fire dynamics knowledge, so hence we're writing a new chapter in to the updated and revised edition of that to counter sort of reading fire and the tactical decision making, because we can have all the tools under the sun, but if the guy that's operating and holding the toolbox can't use them, we're sort of stuck really. But that's the direction we're going. I mean, there is certain departments that are doing their own thing and their own research, but people are going off at tangents. The metropolitan departments that have got a lot more budget, can come up with sort of higher profile solutions, which, may not be suitable for our sort of rural combination departments that are, combined between sort of paid on call volunteers and only supplemented by very few full-time guys. It's not a deliverable solution for them. Mm-hmm. So it is difficult. It's difficult to come up with something that sort of holds everyone accountable, but also again allows for the differences in sophistication in the training requirements and more importantly budget. It's a very, very difficult question.
Yeah, I agree. There's something to that effect there. We got James has asked a question down here in the thing. It says there's been a lot of talk about departments bringing back ultra high pressure hand lines. Are there any pros and cons to using ultra high pressure versus standard infantry quarter lines with 125 to 150 GPM nozzles, and its effect on being able to reduce deterioration using the slicers method? I would assume less water would equal less heat absorption, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on that, Ben?
From a purely scientific perspective, I mean, a high pressure reel with the ability for the small droplets and sort of optimal heat absorption from the gases, from the smoke and the smoke only is great, but we've got to balance that with actual application and the flow that we require to extinguish. So, high pressure lines great for cooling gases, but not so good because of the reduced flow to actually put fires out. So, my personal perspective is get very skilled with a sort of lower pressure, higher flow hose line. But again, that's personal perspective. I think that's something that we lag behind in the UK. We're not as good at using heavy bore hose as you guys in the station. It's all these weak tea drinking linemen that can't handle and manage the line as well.
We're still working on it ourselves, but it's it is pretty much commonplace. I haven't really had a lot of high pressure. We were just getting rid of that when I got on the department in the early 80s. We had some of that, but it was just phasing out. So I've really never had a whole lot of experience with it.
It is good. I mean, it's good for cooling gases. I mean, if you guys have seen the single cell training using a converted shipping containers, which are only meters to feet, 40 foot by maybe 4,800 cubic feet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, standard shipping container. I mean, with a limited heat energy release from the fuel, maybe just using strand board, high pressure, light flow. We can do all kinds of tricks with it. Sort of lifting the smoke layer through, reducing the temperature, the volume and the pressure, because we can generate these lovely, small 0.3 micron droplet sizes. But, if we were to throw a sofa in there or a settee with a lot more sort of heat energy or, some laptops, then, yeah, we could cool gases, but we actually couldn't put the fire out. So, it's, for me now, knowing what I know, I would go, again, sort of low pressure, high capacity for flow. There's a great, it's in this book again. I'm not trying to sell it. Liters per minute of flow rate versus what it can absorb. So I don't know whether you guys can sort of see that sort of liters per minute versus energy absorption. But what I've actually done is converted it there to standard everyday items. So if we look at sofas, I mean, this is based on a guy called Paul Grimwood's work some years ago. But so if we look at a say single mattress, 1 megawatt, 100 liters per minute, that's sort of 25 gallons, and a 3-seat sofa, 300 liters is 90 gallons per minute to put out. And with a high pressure hose reel, you're getting nowhere near that in terms of gallons. You may get anywhere between 15 and 21. So you can see it's not going to put any of that out really at all.
Yeah.
So what have we got here?
John says, thanks for the response. I just copied that YouTube link, John. I'll check it out. And I've seen that video. I'm just not familiar with exactly what you're talking about. I'm certainly familiar with the Falcon Hand case. So I'll go back and look at it again.
Aerosols, exchange services.
The only time I've used high pressure, we were over in the Netherlands recently, and that's what they had. They were using high pressure lines, so that's all we had to work with. So I remember picking up the thing, kind of having my doubts, kind of like, okay, what's this do, and how do you work it, And but we fought fire all day long and got along pretty good. It wasn't. We didn't have any great barrier using it, so it worked okay. I mean, it was fine. But I need myself. I'm curious about that myself. As to, is there? I guess looking at my fire department, that's one of the things I'm looking at. Is do our guys and gals have all the tools they need? Is there anything we can give them to allow them to be more effective and operate safer? Whatever I can find to do that, we'll go find it. And if high pressure is part of that, we'll figure out a way to do it. But we still have
high pressure lines are great because they're very maneuverable. But again, we've become overly reliant on them in the UK. We had a line of duty death in 2004 in London, a place called Bethnal Green in the East End, where these guys, the crews on the job were using a high pressure line to try and fight another fire in a basement, and simply the flow wasn't sufficient, so they couldn't even hold it. It was just sort of developing, getting on top of them. Whereas if they'd have gone for heavier flow, lower pressure, it may have had a different outcome. But the heat that was being generated in this basement, one, they were situated right on the flow path, and secondly, it was heating everything up, all the contents on the ground floor as well. So all the ground floor was starting to pyrolyze as well, and once fire had broken through, we had a gaseous phase ignition which escalated, throughout the premise. But again, we've been caught a couple of times. There was another incident in 2007. There was 4 line of duty deaths in a warehouse in a place called Atherton-on-Stour, where these guys were using a high pressure line and were at one stage 120 meters into a building. And again, it's no good. You may as well take a water pistol to any kind of loading. Okay. I think I've lost sound with you, Eddie. I don't know.
There you are. You're back. Okay.
Back in the
I lost you there. So what was that last one?
again, sort of the high pressure lines in the UK, people are more reliant on them and being exposed to a couple of line of duty deaths. And again, one of the things was we didn't understand generally the relationship between the flow rate and the cooling capability of the water. So again, the high pressure lines have got a place, but good for gas cooling, not so good for actual extinguishing. Where are we as well?
James, see the video link. I'm scared to click it while I'm doing this, so I'm pretty sure it will cause my computer to take a nap. But I will, James, I'll go look at that once we get done and see what's going on.
Yeah, thanks for that, James.
Anybody have any other questions? And while we're waiting, I want to mention the ISFSI Fall Conference is coming September 27th through October 1st. I think the last, as the early bird, or I know something to do with the registration is today. I'm not sure if it's the end of the discounted rate or what, but September 27th through October 1st, it's in Cincinnati, Ohio. Those are really unique events because it's solely focused on instructor development, which is something it was pretty rare to see that to be the sole focus. You'll get it as a piece of something else, but that's certainly something you want to look at if you haven't already as an ISFSI member. And also, Lee was telling me, our executive director, that they have submitted for an additional research funding for basement fires. So that's one of the other places we want to look more in depth as to what's the best, science and tactics related to that. So all that, hopefully that'll pan out. You never know, but they should know soon. So now, Ben, do you have a whole lot of? I wouldn't imagine there would be a ton of resistance to this fire dynamic stuff. We've had some. We're better now. 5 years ago it was pretty chaotic, but now things are pretty smoothed out. I think you still have people that hate it, but there's always going to be somebody that hates something. So, do you have that kind of thing?
They're hating on me, Eddie.
Well, I just wondered, do you have to fight that battle in the UK, or is it just kind of normal business over there?
It's very it's difficult, Eddie, because I'm actually telling chiefs of departments and their national committee, what we call CEPWA, which is like the like you've got the IASC. Mm-hmm. I'm telling these guys and saying, you're having budgetary cuts imposed on you, but actually you need to invest more money in live fire training and the equipment we're using and X, Y, and Z, and they don't like that. But because where there's a legal requirement and this is enforceable, we've always got the trump card of saying, well, if you fail to do this, we're now on record as saying that you need it. There's been a need identified, and they have to gamble whether that could be brought up, because if it was brought up at an inquest, line of duty death, or an injury investigation, and if it was on the record and traced back, they would be culpable and could be held to account for it. So it's a difficult position for any chief of department to be in, because it's not only the fire dynamics side, it's you've got our colleagues that do tech rescue who are, fighting the same battles. They want new equipment. But what we generally find in the UK is, our line of duty deaths, which are reasonably rare, thankfully, it's generally people when they've got FCBA on the back. So we've got that, negotiating tool of shame and, implied threat and asking the chief who the fancy sharing the cell with if things go wrong. But again, there is an element of resistance. For example, there's certain departments will not use positive pressure ventilation. It's pretty much a taboo subject in certain areas. For example, London will not touch PPV, and in some ways it's the right decision for that department, but the rationale's wrong. The decision should be on the basis of there's so many alterations has been made to properties and premises within London without going through the building codes, without going through the regulations, that the attending firefighters would not be able to identify flow paths because, you know, they could be so convoluted, going up 2 or 3 floors, back and forth. It would be very difficult to not be able to find a flow path. Whereas in the northern cities where the building is a lot more simple, you know, we can implement PPV. But the decision hasn't been arrived at with that rationale. It's something completely different and financially driven.
It's game time.
No, it's work time. Okay.
No, it's soccer here.
No, it's not soccer. Just give Uncle Ben 10 minutes, brother. Okay. Wait. So the rationale's not always correct, although in that case the decision's there. But a lot of departments won't fully embrace PPV as an aggressive tactic to supplement you know, the fire dynamics.
Well, you know, the other interesting thing to compare from one side of the pond to the other is that you guys have had a document guiding tactics since 2000. And the closest we've come to that right now is what it will be one day. The NFPA 1700, I think, is our first attempt at that sort of document. And even before it's written, it's taken a lot of heat because, you know, people will, like, well, I don't know, they don't want to write down how to operate.
Yeah, I mean, I hugely emphasize that because, you know, you guys and the training officers and everybody's there today. I mean, you know, you're fighting battles not only sort of within your department, but it's, you know, it's organisations like the state fire chiefs. And what I would recommend in the interim, and I think this is where the ISFSI are moving and leading in the right direction, is to develop a good practice guide that people can adopt, because trying to get things written into legislation is so difficult to try and get things accepted, because even if it's the right thing ethically to do, you know, we're dealing with people with, you know, got egos and want certain control, want concessions, and, you know, it's a process of ongoing negotiation, and have we all got time to dedicate to that, to sort of fighting the good fight?
And we've got another question coming in from James. He says he understands we all have problems at the local level, but oops, hang on, let me back up. But how do we get the mainstream publishers like ISFSI to incorporate fire dynamics, not just fire behavior, in the essentials that comes out every year? And I'm with you, James. We've been wrestling with that. The ISFSI has, and me personally, really back since I think I was president, trying to get that straight. And it's a little bit of, it started out a little bit of back and forth, right? You know, the publishers will say, well, the NFPA has to update the standard, and technically that's accurate. But when you go look at the standard, it doesn't say that much. It says that the student must have an understanding of fire behavior. Well, it's a pretty broad statement, right? It's not very specific. It's been an ongoing discussion. I'm not sure what it's going to take to get. I think the one committee that has a lot of say in that is the 1001 group. And they're kind of unique. They're a competency-based standard. There's what I'd love to have happen is there'd be a training document on it. If there was an actual training document on fire behavior, then that would fall into the 14 group, like with the 1403 and 10s and that. And there you have folks that can get it done. We've already done it. We're just waiting. We're trying to figure out to give it to somebody to be able to put it in the publications. So we're working on it, brother. It's a tough deal. What I tell people in my classes in the United States is it really comes down to your training director. Every state has a training director, and they interpret how to do this stuff, right? So In my state, I have the flexibility to do what I need to do in my department. I'm the authority having jurisdiction, and I can determine my local curriculum and influence that. But there are other states that you don't have that. The state determines the curriculum and what can be taught. So in that case, it makes things a little tougher. You'll have to work with the state training director to get that way. At a minimum, if they would just issue a directive to say that you are authorized to use the new information, provided it comes from a vetted source, that would be a step in the right direction. But it's still an ongoing battle we're trying to deal with. Probably will be for the next 5 or 10 years, I suspect. The standards run in 5-year cycles. And of course, we caught the 1001 right at the worst time. It just cycled before all this, we really got our act together. So we're working on it. Some of them have done what they can. I've seen addendums published. I know there'll be the next versions of the textbooks will have a lot of updated information. It's still an ongoing battle. We've got another comment. We have a means equipped. What's it?
We've got Ivano here talking about high pressure systems and potentially limiting the damage to the property, sort of minimal water use. And yes, in theory, you know, you are correct in that you know, if water is used as efficiently as possible. And I know we've got some people that are trying to shorten the odds in that direction. I know that the guys over at Kill the Flashover starting to use sort of surfactants and to reduce surface tension of water to try and make it go further and get more bang from the buck. But the issue we've got, again, there's still that minimum amount that we require to, you know, fully extinguish a fire. And again, sort of 20 litres, which is in gallon, what just under 5 gallon, isn't going to you know, extinguish any kind of compartment fire that's taken hold. What the department in the UK did develop a system along these lines, and never really got it on the run operationally because they started using it in tests. You know, mistakenly did the product launch and did all the press, you know, prior to the test conclusion, and then realised it didn't actually work, and they've never been able to use it operationally. But guys, that was developed by a French company, but the brand, the nozzle, was called the Firebug ST15. If anybody wants to look at that similar principle. So again, sort of high pressure mixing can be useful, but not ideal.
Okay. Well, gang, as we get ready to wrap up here in the next few minutes, if there's any last questions, you can shoot them in and we'll do our best. And obviously, you can always reach out through the ISFSI or email Ben or I. We'd be happy to help you in any way we can as far as getting information. I'm going to go back, and I've been copying all these video links, and I'll be going back and looking at them and seeing what you guys are pointing out. Because I'm curious. I want to see what it is out there to learn, too. So any other thoughts, Ben, before we hop off the line here, bud? And you got to go watch the soccer game. Not
at all. It's going to be in trouble. If anybody wants to know where he is and track him down and punish him, he's in Newport, Rhode Island, you know, on his Hugo. Be a good boy. But yeah, honestly, more than happy to help at any time. You know, through ISFSI, Jamie and Eddie, more than happy to pass my email on if I can give the same perspective. But the guys at ISFSI and Eddie are really driving in the right direction, and we've got to be careful in terms of wholesale adopting European techniques. It's got to be that blended and hybrid approach, you know.
Right. That's been the overarching theme across this whole thing. Is everybody will they tend to want to swing the pendulum all the way to one direction, and I think it's wise to, you know, look at different approaches. How can you incorporate it in your department? Figure out how not only do you have to have the equipment and the concept and understanding on how to use it, you have to be able to train people on it It has to be repeatable. Depends on how many people you have in your department. I've got 400 or 500 to deal with, so I have to give it some thought. That's how am I going to train all these people in how to operate? So it's a complicated thing, and I expect it will be challenging us for the next years to come. I don't know that it ever stops. Really, it's always something.
I mean, would people have any interest in sort of an instructor's masterclass if we were able to put something together, maybe a weekend attendance, using a facility and establish some basics and standardized evolutions that could be replicated easily all over the US.
Yeah, the ISFSI already has they just launched, been within this past year, a hands-on component to this types of things. You were looking at the prop, you and I were chatting at FDIC at the prototype they had made. And that continues to go down the road and figure out how to do that. So, yeah, I think that's great. I think that's probably one of the greater needs right now is for people to understand how do I take all this stuff we're talking about and teach it at your berm, your berm building at your place. that's the trick where these guys are working. So,
I mean, one of the difficulties from the outside looking into the US is. Again, some of the burning regulations, I mean, I remember we had quite an in-depth discussion about particle board versus, which still compressed dust, versus strand boards. With the strand board, when it pyrolyzes, when the heat's exposed to it, it's the relative sort of uniform nature of the gases, which gives you that nice sort of gaseous phase combustion. And from a teaching perspective, you can do a lot with it. However, are we taking them people into sort of a false sense of security within a shipping container, using very light fuels with a low energy release, or not? And again, that's something we weigh up, because it's got to be a gradual sort of step-by-step process. But one of the things that we've got in the UK is there's only perhaps sort of half a dozen of us that are capable as instructors of setting up proper required structural burns. And I think we've done 4 nationally in the last 6 years. Again, it's not something that's done, one, because the properties are at a premium. People won't give us houses to burn down now. But secondly, the potential for them going wrong is that high. But on the other hand, are we being remiss over here by just using light loading and low energy release materials? We're not doing everything right by any means.
I lost your audio again.
Well, no, I was just saying that we're not necessarily doing the right thing by using sort of low energy release, light loading, and with being unable to use required structures. And having very few instructors that are capable and experienced enough to do it correctly in this country, we're perhaps being remiss. It's, I think it's important for us to acknowledge our own, weaknesses and the flaws in our system too. But the Atlas container system that's portable would be a good step in the right direction, certainly for departments that have to share facilities or a lesser resource. There's a lot of stuff we could do with it.
All right, guys, we're out of time. Again, if you have any further questions, you can shoot an email or a message to the ISFSI. Jamie or Lee will make sure it gets to me or Ben. Ivano, thanks for coming in from Italy. I think he wins the furthest distance traveled by the internet, right?
There you go. So
very cool. Keep training.